black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain, turned and stared at me. And this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Sunday night, here we go. Can't wait. We'll be talking to Rob, and Rob had an encounter in Georgia, a very recent encounter when he was face-to-face with one of these things, and it sure seemed interested in his gun that he was holding at the time. And then we'll talk to Howard, and Howard had an encounter in Oklahoma. Had to stop and think about it for a second. Howard had an encounter in Oklahoma when he was younger, and he saw this quote-unquote man walking across his grandfather's property, and it turned out not quite to be a man. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Next week, I'll be in Texas, and I can't wait to go down there and meet everyone for the live show. We're actually doing a meet and greet, and it's up on the blog now if you want more information. But we'll be driving from Houston to Dallas, and it'll be myself, Tony Merkel from the Confessionals, and Bob Gimlin doing a meet and greet, a night of fun. Hope you guys can make it. If you missed Friday's show, I had Doug on, and he was talking about, I called it terror on the job site, and it's probably one of the more terrifying encounters I've heard in a long time. A great encounter, and I want to thank Doug again for coming on. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Rob to the show. Rob, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
No, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And this encounter took place in Georgia, didn't it, Rob?
That's correct. Kind of south central Georgia, and around the Tahlequah County area, which most people who are interested in fishing and all would know that's where the world's record bass was first caught around 1930, 23 or something like that. I'm not exactly sure on the date, but George Perry caught the fish. I mean, it weighed 22 pounds, 2 ounces, which, I mean, held the record for many, many years. I mean, up until here recently, where a Japanese fella caught the new world's record. But yeah, it held the record for a long time.
I gotcha. Well, if you would take us back to your encounter, what were you doing? And walk us into what happened. Okay,
well, just to give you a kind of a short, to what led up to this, I had moved here to Tahlequah County around 2015, and married a lady here who was from here. Shortly after that, my sister had developed breast cancer, and she had the operations and the augmentation on her breast, and me and her were real close because she had, my dad had raised both of us in a little town not far south of here called Roberta, which is central Georgia. We had grew up there all our lives, and we were just real close. And Dad died in '09, and then Lee developed this, and we just, felt sure she was going to beat it, and felt good about it. And then in 2016, it came back, and we found out it was on her brain. It just really put, everybody involved, the family, what was left, and I was really going through a hard time, and I was right there with her up until she passed away in 2017. It was just real bad on us
Yeah,
all.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I mean she told me, she said, I'm dying, and it really, got to me. I just never really accepted it, until we put her in the ground on August the 17th of 2017. Shortly after that, I'm, really going through a lot of trouble with that. And I mean, it's causing a lot of problems. I mean, you can imagine the strain on a marriage, and I'm the kind of person, I kind of deal with things myself. And when I really need to speak out like I'm doing now, I didn't. And, it put a strain on my marriage, and I was going through that. And anyway, a buddy of mine called me from back home, and he's talking to me and trying to help me through this. And he told me, he said, look, he said, I know down there where you're at, there's a lot of good hunting. And it was shortly after deer season in 2019, February of 2019. It'd been a little over a year since her death. And he said, why don't you go scout us out a place, and we'll go hog hunting. Deer season's over with, and that's the WMA down there close to the river, and it was. So I told him I would, and if everything's correct, it was on a Sunday in 2019 in February. I think it was around the second or third week of February. It was around my birthday because I was born on February the 19th, and I went down to the WMA, close to where the World's Records bass was caught. I mean, don't have no problem telling nobody about where it was. I mean, that's where it was. I had went in there. It stopped at the back gate, the one that went down to the public landing, and I had my dog with me, and he was running around there. We had started out toward where I thought the lake was. I wasn't even sure. I'd never been to the lake. I just was going in the direction where I had, heard it was. I was getting pretty close to where I thought it should be, and my dog went missing. I mean, he just, went missing. And I tried to call him, and he was nowhere around. So I kind of walked on, really looking for him, and I could see gleaming of water up ahead of me. And I figured that, that either had to be the lake or some part of it. And as I got closer to it, I started to smell something. It was like something dead. The first thing that I thought when I smelt it, it was dead. And as I got closer to the water, and I'm not quite in view of it yet, but I can see the sun gleaming off of it. It was definitely water. It got stronger, and as I approached it, I mean, I'm looking around because it's so strong at that point to where, I mean, I ought to be on it. Whatever it is, I ought to be seeing whatever it is. That's what I'm thinking. The first thing I'm thinking is, well, maybe, deer season's just gone out. Maybe somebody's killed something, and it's, I've always heard animals go into water, to when they get hit or whatever. And I'm looking real close around, and all of a sudden, I catch a glimpse of something to the right of me. I mean, it's nothing automatic, I just kept a glimpse of something. It's kind of like a bird, fluttering. And as I turn and look about 80 feet away, there's this object standing beside this tree, like a gum tree or a walnut tree, which they're quite prevalent down here, in the South. And I look, and I'm not really catching any, nothing's registering to me about, what I'm looking at. And all of a sudden, I catch movement. And as I focus in, I look, and it's around where the lips would be of something, at this angle. And I'm still not quite sure about what I'm looking at. And as I look at it, I'm kind of quartering toward it. And I had a gun with me. I mean, I always, when I go scouting, I take a gun with me. And I had it kind of behind my right leg, hanging lateral to my body. And I'm looking at it, and it's, when I realize what it is, it's the lips of this being standing there. I mean, he's kind of moving his lips like he's chewing on something. And when I realized, what I'm looking at, I kind of stepped back. And when I did, my gun came kind of actually beside me instead of right behind my leg. And he's automatically, and that's when I knew that it was something, because his eyes went directly to that gun. I mean, he just, boom, went to that gun. And then I realized, what in the hell am I looking at? I mean, what is this? He's looking at me. He goes back to me. I realize then he's looking at me. And I don't have the best eyesight in the world. I mean, I should, have glasses, but it was close enough that I could distinguish him looking at me and him looking at that gun. I mean, he knew what that gun was. And I'm like, oh my God, what in the hell am I looking at? I instinctively, I kind of knew, but I didn't want to, I didn't ever, it was kind of just an all of a sudden moment. He kept looking at that gun and looking at me, and I don't know why I did it. To this day, I don't know why I did it. But I just kind of lifted my left hand up like, hey, I'm no threat. I just lifted it up. And when I did that, it looked directly at me, and then it turned slightly to the left and started. He took 2 steps and covered 15 feet and got the tree that he was closely beside in between me and him. And he directly started walking away. And I'm still sitting there thinking, what am I looking at? And as he stepped away, I mean, it was, his head never moved. It stayed completely level as he stepped away. It was a freakish kind of movement that he made. He stepped away, got that tree in between me and him, and took 4 or 5 more steps, and there was a fork right there in the tree, just a little above his head. But the ground was kind of moving uphill slightly away from me, and I caught one more glimpse of him between those forks of that tree. And I could hear him, but shortly after that, I couldn't see him no more, and I wasn't moving. I mean, I was just left and, like, what in the hell is that? And he walked away. And I just sat there. I mean, I stood there for a moment, wondering what and I'm still, my dog is nowhere around. And I'm thinking, where in the hell did River go? He walked away, went out of hearing. I didn't see him no more. I'm sitting there thinking, is all this stress that I've been under and everything. I mean, I was really just baffled about what I'd saw. And I turned, I started walking back to the truck after I gained my composure. And I was feeling so bad. I didn't know what the feeling was I was feeling. And I got back to the truck and my dog was there at the truck. I mean, usually he stays with me right from the beginning, but he was there back at the truck. And time I opened the door, he just jumped in. I mean, usually you got to coax him in the truck. I mean, but he was right there in the truck.
He's like, we're out of here.
Yeah, we're out of here. I mean, he's like gone. I mean, he's a chocolate Cocker Spaniel. And I mean, usually he's very protective over me and my wife, Kathy. I mean, anything, he just raises cane at. I never heard him bark or nothing, but he was there at that truck and he wanted to get in it. And I just sat there at that truck and the feeling that I felt, I mean, it was like I was wanting to get sick, and I couldn't understand it. It was like I wasn't in fear at the time. And when I had talked to you earlier, I went back and I started thinking, and I can remember the one time I felt that way. And I know, I mean, people may say, well, God, this guy's, he's really going back searching for stuff, but it's the honest to God truth. The only time I remember ever feeling that way, I was 13 or 14, and I was allowed to go to a Saturday night party that a girl had, and some people there had some pot. And I grew up in kind of a Southern Baptist home, and, you was supposed to be a good boy. That kind of stuff was taboo. And I took a puff off a joint, and I ain't kid you. I had to almost get help because I felt like I had done something so wrong when I took that puff off that joint. I mean, really. I mean, I can remember the sickening feeling I got because I felt like I'd done something. My grandmother, who raised me, growing up in a split family, she raised me, and I thought I had done something bad. And that's the same feeling I'd had when I saw this creature. And when I finally came around it, there was just something wrong about seeing him. It was just so wrong. When I saw him, it just felt so wrong. I didn't know what to think about it.
Yeah,
and
no,
I mean,
it's kind of shocking.
It was absolutely shocking in it.
Yeah.
But the thing about it, I've heard people talk about getting sick and everything, and when I talked to you last, I was trying to put things together, but that was the best way for me to describe the way I felt. I felt like it was wrong. It was just wrong for me to be there and to see that. It wasn't like he was overly frightening. When he looked at me, I didn't feel like he was fixing to charge me or nothing like that. I mean, I grew up, my daddy and granddaddy both were gunsmiths, and I grew up hunting, and I've been in the woods. God, there's no telling how many times. There's no telling how many deer and stuff I've killed. When I saw him, the feeling I got after that experience was that was wrong. It was just wrong, for me to have seen him or to experience that. Like I said, I never felt like, like I said, I grew up, hunting and everything, and
yeah,
I knew I had a shotgun with 5 loads in it, and I'm a pretty good shot. And I didn't feel threatened so far as that, or maybe I should have been. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. From what you're telling me, it kind of seems like he was just kind of on his way. He was in between, or.
I think I wandered up on him, and really, so far as what I hear about people with infrasound and all, I don't think any of that played a part. But I kind of stumbled upon him, like he did upon me. And the one thing that I can say, if anybody ever asked, he knew what that gun was. When I stepped out and he saw that gun, he knew what it was. he nailed in on it. I mean, he looked right down at it. You know, I didn't feel like there was no need to throw up, you know, or take a defensive stance. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why. To this day, I just threw my hand up like, you know, like an Indian would, you know, hey, peace, let's, you know.
No, I get it. Yeah, I mean, and I think that was smart doing that. And you're probably right. He probably did know what that gun was. I'm curious, what did he look like? Can you describe him for the audience?
The best description that I have given, you know, that I've told my friends and I've told everybody else, and this is the honest to God truth. Kerry from Odyssey, Bigfoot Odyssey, he gave a description of the one that he saw. Now, it wasn't per se exactly like the one he saw, but it was very, very close. He was dark haired. He wasn't black, but he was dark haired. And the skin on his face, which was exposed, it was dark, like a dark charcoal gray. Nose, prominent, but it wasn't like a gorilla flat. I mean, it had a bridge to it, and, you know, it wasn't exactly on the end of it sticking out, but it wasn't exactly flat. And big, dark, almost, and I am colorblind, so I can't distinguish between red and like bright orange. They kind of look the same to me. But, you know, dark colors, they kind of look the same. And his eyes were very, very dark. I mean, like black, dark brown. And I did not see any white around them. But I could tell when he was looking at me or looking at that gun. Big mouth. I mean, that's the one thing I remember, because that's the first thing I saw was his lips moving, like he was chewing something. I mean, like moving it from side to side. I never saw any teeth. But that's the picture I saw. The best, you know, when Kerry said that this was what he saw, that's what it kind of looked like, except it wasn't quite as dark in the face as what he saw. And it just had the appearance that, you know, I didn't think about it at the time of being, you know, evil or anything like that. It just, after the circumstances, I felt like it was just wrong for me to have seen it. That's just the way I felt. I felt like it was bad for me to see it. I didn't get, you know, sick for 3 or 4 days. I just felt bad, a dreadful, like I had seen something I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean. And I think it's fascinating, the whole interaction that you guys had. I mean, really, there was no aggression. He was probably just as surprised to see you as you were to him.
And that's what I thought. When he looked at me, that's what I thought. Like, I stumbled up on him, like, you know, maybe he stumbled up on me. I mean, like, what? I mean, that's what I thought. When I looked at him, the first thing I thought, there's 2 things I thought. My daddy had always told me that there was no animal in North America that you should fear. Everything fears you. And when I saw him, that's the first 2 things I thought. I said, Daddy, where are you at now? I mean, I can remember him saying this just like it was yesterday. I mean, you know, I was like, what would you say now? And, you know, I thought, you know, I was a surprise to him like he was to me. I mean, it was just, the first thing his expression said was, what the hell are you doing here? You know,
yeah, and I think if you would have pulled that gun up, I think it would have turned south. I think that him looking down at it, then kind of looking back.
I believe that. I believe that. I mean, I do. I mean, he was really zeroed in on that. I mean, he just, I mean, he would like look at it and then he'd look back at my face to see what I'm thinking. Like, are you fixing to pull this up? And the moment that I lifted my hand like that, I mean, it's almost like this joker was thinking what I was thinking. And I don't know what to think about that. I mean, if this is an animal, if this is a if this is something that's supposed to be an animal, a flesh and blood animal, and I'm not saying there was nothing telepathically there, you know what I'm saying? That he's thinking what I'm thinking, but if that kind of expression he's giving me and I'm reading that, what the hell is this? I mean, it was like, he was thinking what I was doing. Like he knew when I lifted my hand that I wasn't going to do anything defensively. I mean, what is this?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, and you're right. I think, most primates, and I'm not saying it's like a monkey or, a great ape or some sort, but, even most primates recognize what you're doing, and they keen in on it. Even your dog knows what you're doing. There's time. Yeah. I'm sure you could look at, what was his name? River?
Yeah. My dog, River,
a cool,
Cocker Spaniel.
Yeah, cool name. Even your dog knows when you're upset, knows when you're happy, knows when you're sad. And, it's not hard to, I think for animals and humans to pinpoint, to look at another creature or whatever you want to say and know what its intentions are. And, I can see how you wouldn't say evil because really it wasn't doing anything. I think a lot of times when people say evil, it's very easy to come to that conclusion when one's rushing you or growling at you or roaring at you and throwing stuff at you. Evil seems to come to mind, but they don't. Not all of them act that way. I mean, it's pretty hit and miss.
I've listened to a lot of your podcasts since, and I mean, even during that time, because me and my sister's daughters, they were 9 years old when she passed away, and I would go down frequently in Savannah and visit them. And one of them, she was just, there ain't no such thing, and the other one, the one that is more like the hill side of the family, my side, she was like, yeah, we'll go research them. She's just always into it. And I always cut up with them, about that. That's really what, got me into it. I mean, we were just looking through some YouTube stuff that day, and we ran across some videos and we were looking at them, and, some of them were pretty credible. I mean, I thought, some of them, were definitely, I thought, I don't know about that, but I was just always been kind of a skeptic,
Yeah, I get it.
I just never had, I've been hunting since I was 14 years old. I mean, you just never know about that. And
yeah, and that's why I'm not hard on hunters who are hardcore skeptics, where they say, well, I've been out, never heard anything, never saw anything. I get it. I was the same way at one time. I mean, I've been all over Washington, up in the hills and everywhere, never heard anything, never saw anything.
Some of the most best hunting in the world up there. I just, around here, you either hunting deer or, I can remember during a time where I would go coon hunting. I had coon hounds. We would go during the nights, and I never thought nothing about it. But there were some things that happened, and when I look back on it, I don't know whether I should relate it to that or not, And
yeah, I understand. A lot of times you look back, even on weird things that happen, you're like, that's strange, especially after you have an encounter,
It was. I can remember times when I was deer hunting out on my dad's place, and it got a lot of history to it. There's still the old log cabin where in 1700 and something, my great-great-great-grandparents settled that land. The log cabin's still standing. A hewn log cabin. Got wood pegs, to connect the logs. 3 walls are still standing. And they had musket holes where they shot Indians out of. And there were stories, about stuff through the years. And I've had people in my family who dedicated their life to hunting. And one was, my Uncle Dave Newell, and around Homosassa, Florida, Leesburg. He hunted the Willacoochee National Forest down there in River Basin, and he was editor of Field and Stream for years. And I can remember him telling my dad in the 70s, of course he was up in age then, but he was telling my dad about some things, and there was a creature that he had seen the tracks of and all. And when I look back on it, that's what he was talking about. I mean, he had run into the so-called skunk ape down there. He was even one of the last people to take Annie Oakley hunting a hunting trip there.
Oh, very cool.
And you can Google that up. David M. Newell. He's in there. I mean, he was editor in Field and Stream from about 1940 to 1945, and then Sports Afield. And
yeah, it's a cool history to have. Yeah.
Yeah, we were real close. But I just, I mean, growing up like I did, I mean, and my dad telling me, I can remember, sitting in front of my grandmother and granddaddy's big screen television back in those days. I can remember seeing the Patterson and Gimlin film and that thing walking across there. And my daddy said, that ain't nothing no more than a guy in a monkey suit. And I can remember later on, something came up on National Geographic or something, and Daddy said, there it is again. And I said, well, Daddy, let me ask you this. I done got, 19 or 20 then. I said, where in the hell is that suit? I mean, you keep talking about a man in a suit. Where is that suit? Nobody has proven that to be a hoax. Where is that suit? Because I'm sure during that time, and I told him that then, I said, that was during the time when Hollywood and stuff was in its infancy. I mean, the Planet of the Apes had come out. And I think later on, Gerald Meldrum brought that up. That, where is that suit? I mean, where is it? Nobody has been able to defute that. So this thing has, been around. And there's been no suit to prove that it was a guy in a suit. There's just been a lot of questions. I mean, a lot of things to rack somebody's brain about it. I mean, if you look up the history of, the Indians and proclaiming to see it, it's just baffled me,
Yeah, well, and, now they're out there. I mean, you can look at historical accounts, but there's nothing to compare to being eye to eye with one.
No, there's nothing. I mean, it's there, and I don't know whether I feel lucky for seeing one or whether, it's something I need to take in consideration about myself. I just don't know. I mean, it's bothered me, and I mean, that's one reason it's taken me since February to contact. I mean, I've listened to a lot of things. I mean, it's nothing that I just jumped up on. I've listened to a lot of accounts and a lot of people, and I guess the biggest reason that, I thought to contact you was that, I'm not trying to blow you up or discredit anybody, but, you have the most credible witnesses and the way you go about your show of trying to get this out. I mean, and that's just a fact. I mean, the first time I heard your show, I thought, this has got to be real, because there's nothing at all except witness testimony, and he's not plundering anybody for anything that they didn't see. And, that's one thing that I've just always been, I'm all about, real, how somebody really saw things and what's real. And that's one thing that's been kind of a trouble to me about some of these other people that broadcast. I mean, and not saying that they're not telling the truth. I mean, I'm not saying that at all. But, and God, I love them to death. They tell a great story. Bear and Coonbo. They tell some great, great things. You know what I'm saying? But, I mean, I just don't see how anybody could listen to them. And it's like a coon hunt every other night. How could you experience that and it not have no more effect on you? I mean, I just wonder, I mean, has it been around that long and been that accustomed to them like that? Because that would scare the hell out of me.
Yeah, it's hard to say. They're good guys. Bear and Coonbo are good guys. Yeah,
they're great guys. I love Bear and them. I mean, but if it's been around that long, I really don't know what to say. I mean, because like I said, I've been around, and I did have an encounter, and it was just like things they saw. And if they're seeing that Joker that I saw that much, I don't want to. I mean, I just don't believe I could go out again and see it. They've got to really be devoted. You know what I'm saying?
I'm with you. Well,
I mean,
I'm with you
know he's there. I've seen it, you know, and it just scares the hell out of me for them to think that they're going out. They look at it like it's just a booger, you know. Well, booger or nothing. I mean, that son of a bitch scared the hell out of me. I mean, after I thought about it and know everything, and it walked off, and I was left in awe. I didn't know what to think. You know, I mean,
it'll definitely stick with you for a long time. I mean, it'll stick with you the rest of your life, to be honest with you. And it is a terrifying account. I mean, they're all terrifying, really, even when they're not aggressive, because it's like you said, the shock kicks in. You know, your adrenaline. It's an adrenaline dump.
I mean, it was after the fact. After I got back, I mean, I couldn't. I mean, I was sick, and I got to thinking. I've heard about everybody like that, and I just kept thinking about it being wrong. And the only thing I could tell you about was, you know, my grandma telling me, you stay away from them kind of things. You know, you don't get around. And when I took a puff off that joint, I felt so guilty. And that's the same way I felt. And I just wondered, you know, what level of wrong am I dealing with right here? Is this something, you know, is this thing something demonic, or is it just wrong for me to see it? I didn't know. I mean, I still don't know. I don't know. You know, I don't know what this thing is. I mean, if I could say what it was, I mean, the first thing, you know, after I really thought about it was, it's just not supposed to be here. It's not. It's really not. I mean, at first, you know, like I said, it is a flesh and blood creature. I saw it. I know that it's there. But is it supposed to be here? I don't know. I mean, I really don't.
I hear you. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on and share it and all the kind words you said about the show. Thank you for that. And I mean, your questions are my questions, man. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of questions out there, but I really appreciate coming on, Rob.
Thank you so much, Wes. And I mean, anything that I can do to help you or anybody else out, I'd be glad. I mean, because y'all have helped me out a lot. I mean, just that these things are out there, and you know, I'm not, you know, isolated, and I really appreciate it. I mean, I really do. And you and your podcast and all your witnesses, everybody, y'all have helped me out a lot. I mean, you've really given credibility to something that people didn't want to give credibility to, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
And I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of the show, forhims.com/Sasquatch. Very cool website. Did you know 66% of men lose their hair by the age 35? I think that's about the time I start shaving my head. That's when you really start to notice hair loss, and by that time, it's too late. It's easier to keep the hair that you have than replace the hair that you've lost. forhims.com/Sasquatch is a one-stop place for hair loss, skincare, sexual wellness, all for men. A lot of cool products on the site. And for you ladies out there listening, definitely check it out for your man. forhims.com/Sasquatch. The really cool part is forhims.com/Sasquatch connects you with real doctors, medical grade solutions to treat for hair loss. It's not like snake oil. They actually have real treatment for this. There's no waiting room, no awkward doctor visits. Save hours by going to forhims.com/Sasquatch. It's so easy. What else do you need? Answer a few questions. A doctor will review it and will prescribe to you products that will be shipped directly to your door. Order now. My listeners get a free trial of Hims just for $5 today. Check out the website for full details and safety information. This would cost hundreds of dollars if you went to the doctor or pharmacy. Go to forhims.com/Sasquatch. That's forhims.com/Sasquatch. forhims.com/Sasquatch. And even beyond hair loss, they got a lot of cool products on there. So definitely check it out, guys. Get a little skincare for yourself. You know what I'm talking about? I want to thank forhims.com for sponsoring the show. Let's jump back into it tonight. I want to welcome Howard to the show. Howard, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem, Wes. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you being here. And I know your encounter happened in Oklahoma, didn't it?
Yeah, it happened in Oklahoma. Actually, it would be in the Cherokee County, Tahlequah region.
Oh, very cool.
It's kind of the north, the northeast, close to Arkansas.
I got you.
Right on that Arkansas border. So
I got you. Well, if you would take us back to that moment, I'm real curious to hear the full encounter. Take us back to that moment, and if you would, just kind of walk us into what happened. What were you doing, and what happened?
Well, this was probably right around 82, 83. My brother and I we're a couple years apart in age, but my mother was adopted, and she came from, California, Washington, all those regions out there, and this family here adopted her. So they were settled in Tahlequah. Their grandfather, Pete, was a Cherokee Indian and a very prominent part of the Cherokee tribe. And we would go visit, during the summer. She would go up and check on her adopted parents. And it was always a really good time. That place is just a paradise for any kid to go play around. You could see the Illinois River from their house. It's more beautiful. But where they lived was pretty much back up in the woods quite a ways. But there were, I would say, 6 houses along that way, and it's all Native American housing, all Indian housing. Grandpa Pete and them, theirs was at the end of the road, and they had their cabin that they lived in, and then there was one behind it. And I was, say, 11. It hadn't been that long since my mother was there that they had moved out of the one behind, and it had no running water. I mean, they were still living very primitive. But you could go right there to the back cabin, and the river was right below there, and that's where we would typically always go play. Well, my brother and I happened to be back in that area one day, and I'm trying to see if I can describe this. You'd have a line of trees, and then there was an opening, kind of like a little sandbar, right there to the river, and then a line of trees. And my brother noticed what we assume is a man. Wes, I do not know if a Bigfoot exists. I can't ever say that I do. So we looked down there, and my brother's like, "Hey, what's that guy doing down there?" And then it took me a little bit to zone in on him, and he was. And it was a large man. I will say man. I don't know. And we're down there. Well, that's our grandpa's property. So being kids, we're like, hey. And so in my infinite wisdom, I decide to yell at the guy. I yell. This thing turns, faces us. And that's when it let out a scream. And the scream, it wasn't, the best way I can describe it is the sounds that the big thicket guys, record that scream. It's just, it wasn't deep. It wasn't a groan. It wasn't a growl. I mean, this was a scream. It screamed and took off, which would be basically taking off back to the west along the other tree line, and then disappeared. Well, we're sitting here thinking, what in the world just happened? And it wasn't a couple of minutes, and the neighbor come running around there, and he rushed us back into the cabin. We're in the cabin, and he's in there telling my grandfather what's going on. They're speaking Cherokee to each other. So we're told not to go back outside. But pretty much what our grandfather said was, we're not allowed to go back there right now because they're just passing through. What he meant by that statement, we don't know. So, he always, I think he knew something, living in that area his whole life. I mean, he's literally lived there his entire life. So, around that area, you always hear stories. And we grew up coon hunting down in Tahlequah County, and down there it's a constant. You'll hear it all the time. They call it the red-eyed devil. You'll hear just
what's it called?
All kinds of stories. The red-eyed devil.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah, that's what they call it in that Tahlequah region, Tahlequah antlers. But if I can tell you, this isn't very far. Are you familiar with Mena, Arkansas?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm really not.
It's not real far from that region. Texarkana, Texas.
Yeah. I know that area.
Really not very far from there. I mean, Tahlequah is literally, you can be down there in probably an hour. So, it just runs up through that region, and it's real swampy. That's where the Boggy Creek's at. Remember the Boggy Creek monster?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
The legend of Boggy Creek. Well, there's 2 boggies. There's Muddy and there's Clear. And Muddy runs through Tahlequah. I'm
curious, did he ever go into any more details as far as
he wouldn't, and of course, me being a kid, I kind of quizzed him a little bit, and I'd always ask him, but at the time, exposure to Bigfoot, there was no internet, at my age at that time. So exposure to any type of Sasquatch or anything like that was really, like I said, the only thing we had was The Legend of Boggy Creek, the movie, which scared the bejesus out of any kid, So
yeah, I'm curious. I want to hear more about this man, and what I find fascinating about you calling it a man. I mean, a man's not going to turn around and scream like that and then take off. But one question I want to ask you: when it took off, how fast did it take off? Was it like a man?
Yeah. Oh no, it was. Okay, if I can just describe it, and remember, I'm trying to remember this the best I can.
Yeah.
When I yelled, its back was to us. Okay. So it was right there at the river. When I yelled, this thing on a dime turned and just like, just as loud as it could at us. And it bolted. And when it ran, it was gone. I'm a pretty big guy now, wasn't then, but this thing it looked enormous and it just took off in a flash. But the crazy part about it was, and that's the part, and, my mother, we had the discussion, years and years after, and my brother and I have always brought the story up to each other, but the neighbor literally looked scared when he come around the corner. And I wish I could remember his name because he was a younger guy. He's probably still alive, living in that region.
Yeah. It's so fascinating because, with regard to these creatures, they always say, "Oh, the Native Americans, they're our forest brother." Or, not necessarily the Native Americans say that, but people who think they know what the Native Americans think will go, "Oh, the Native Americans think that they're our forest brothers," and that's not really true. Not from very many Native Americans I've talked to. That's not true at all. And for your grandfather, if it was a friendly forest brother out there, he'd have been like, "Oh, you're fine, go out and play." But for him not to allow you to leave the home and say they're passing through. Obviously your grandfather was worried about it.
Well, that's what, and even my mother, and of course my mother's is an adopted child, but she's as bad as they are about not speaking of things. You just don't talk about certain things. And was our big concern because we had the rest of the weekend and we literally had to stay basically in the corridor of the houses to play. We weren't allowed to go to the woods. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, too, you called a man, because I remember one time a lady contacted me and said, "Well, I ran into this strange man," and she was describing it. She said, "Yeah, he had a big fur coat on, and he turned around and roared at me and then ran off." And I was like, that doesn't sound like a man. Was there any details that you remember? I realize we're going back like 40 years, on this thing, but was there any details you remember from being there?
The only detail, as far, because I could see no facial features. You're looking. This was 100 yards, probably plus, down to the water. So you're not going to see much detail at that point. But I remember the color of the guy, and he was like all in buckskin. Or if you're familiar, with what a buckskin color is, and it was like a deer. But he was but it was all one color. He didn't have a jacket. Because usually no one matches your jacket to your pants, especially. And this was the middle of summer. So why would he be fully dressed? And especially if you're at the river, because there are a lot of people canoeing up and down the Illinois, and they will stop and get out on the sandbars, and hang out, drink beer, whatever. But they're in shorts. You can tell a white man, you can tell an African American man. But this was all one color. It's like I told you, I really have no idea. It was just always a very unique experience.
Yeah, it is. Did you ever go back to that property? And did anything else ever happen?
We've never been back. We went back in a couple of years. We went back up there, and then my grandmother passed away, and then we lost contact with Grandpa Pete, and he passed away, years later. But like I said, the dynamics of the whole being an adopted child and yada, yada, yada. But we did have cousins who lived in that region that we would still stay in touch with every now and then. And I have some cousins around my age, and as children, they always made a joke about the cave at the top of the mountain. And apparently there is a cave in Tahlequah that people can see from up there, but I don't know anybody ever goes up and looks. Who knows? It's probably just a kid's tale.
Did you ever talk to your brother that you were with about this whole thing?
Well, that's really strange. My brother actually lived in Texarkana for quite some time. Fairly successful guy, and his neighbor was a U.S. Marshal. And I typically don't like to tell other people's stories, you know what I mean, because that just, that's their story. But his neighbor was a U.S. Marshal. Really neat guy. And I had went down to visit. We were joking at dinner one evening. I'm like, well, you guys aren't very far from, the Bigfoot movie and all this right here. And he relayed a story of a partner of his who was a U.S. Marshal himself. And he was, getting ready to retire, but he was a big deer hunter. And he went down to what they call a slough. Are you familiar what a slough is?
Yeah.
And it went down to a slough. And I've done this same routine myself as a hunter. You get there, it's dark. Man, you really don't want to go walk out there and climb in a deer stand. You want to kind of wait so you can see, a little bit. And he decided to do that, sat in his truck, was drinking his coffee. And as the sun started to come up, he got out of his truck and he said he opened up, his door to get out. And he had a truck. It's not a double cab. You always had that little small door. And he opened up the side door to get his rifle out. And he said at that time, deer just come out of everywhere, flowing across the road. He thought, man, I've missed my opportunity. I've missed my shot. But he said what was behind that, he'll never forget. And now this is what he does. I never met the man, never got to meet the man. But all he does now is look for, and this guy's a U.S. Marshal here, sitting here telling us this. And he said, 100%, it exists. It's real. He said, this thing hit the road, 2 steps was across, didn't even bother looking at him. He was chasing the deer. So.
Yeah, that's fascinating. A lot of times when, I think, what's interesting, Howard, is how deer react. A deer's going to leave from you at any cost. They're not going to stick around humans. But when these things are around, it's like Mike Woolley's encounter. What's a deer do? It comes right up to his deer stand, puts his head down. It's almost like they know.
Mm-hmm. Well, in here in Oklahoma, I was, thinking about this after we had briefly talked yesterday. In Oklahoma, every game warden we have, one, nothing like that exists. And also, two, we don't have mountain lions or panthers here. Okay, that's always the rule of thumb. I've seen a panther twice out hunting.
Yeah.
And we call them panthers. They're black. I think they're just a black, cougar. But game wardens, they don't exist until what happened? A man in Minko, Oklahoma ran over one. And then there's the body. There's the proof. So then suddenly the story in Oklahoma changed. Well, they are migrating down, and we're getting a small cat migrating up from the Mexico kind of area too. So. Yeah, like I said, I'm one of those people. I think once that someone sees the body, then suddenly, we've believed it all along. We've known about this.
Yeah, that's probably how it's going to go down, which is hilarious to me. But it would be nice if that would happen. Like I was telling you the other day, and people don't like me saying that, but I'm all for one of these things being shot. I'm all for someone dragging it out. Now, whether it'll actually get to the public or not, it's a different story. But and same thing with panthers. I always wonder why game wardens, they do that in other states too. I can think of many on the East Coast where they say, panthers don't exist. And I've talked to hunters and they're like, yeah, they're out there. Or they'll say, we don't have any large cats. And it's like, yeah, they're out there. Go ask a hunter. Don't go ask a game warden because he's going to give you BS. Go straight to a hunter. He's going to tell you they're out there. And
then in this region too, and here is one of the stranger parts, that Tahlequah County area down there, and like I said, I had another brother who's a big coon hunter, but he describes several times being really scared in the woods. And we are outdoorsmen, we're hunters, we don't really get spooked a whole lot. I mean, cats spook me. I mean, they do. When I saw that, I saw a panther, it spooked me because those things are very sleek and very, they could be on you before you know it. But down in that area down there, they actually have more game wardens in that county than they have in the other counties because of all the hunting that takes place down there. And there's a huge Weyerhaeuser forestry division down there. That's one thing a lot of people don't realize. Weyerhaeuser owns a ton of property in that area. So I would look at the financial aspects of finding an animal of this nature and what it would do to affect the forestry industry or, any other type of thing. Because unfortunately, we do get everybody who is a bleeding heart, I hate to use the term liberal, but they cry over everything.
Right.
So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating, especially down there. I get so many reports from Oklahoma, and it's like I was telling you the other night, Oklahoma is very It reminds me of like Maine, Vermont, those states, in the sense that when you talk to people, they'll tell you privately what they've seen, but they don't want to go on the air. They don't want to talk about it publicly, and they'll tell friends and family, and rarely will they talk to an outsider as far as what's going on. But there's a ton going on in Oklahoma.
Yeah, like I said, well, but also too, we've had several shows here and we discussed that. But problem is, and unfortunately, for this type of environment, for some odd reason, it seems like cameras go and find the biggest idiots they can find, and because it makes the legitimate crowd within this community, look silly or uncredible. It's just, it's annoying to see how some things are portrayed. No offense, but it's like the Finding Bigfoot guys. I mean, as a hunter, I'm not going to walk out in the woods with a camera 6 foot in front of my face, a light, a bat, and go stomping around. I mean, if I want to go kill something, then I do it as I'm hunting. I mean, if you're looking for something, you just don't go announce yourself. So
right, you stay like a ghost in the woods.
Yeah, you got to. I mean, like I said, I know nothing about the subject other than discovering your show and really enjoying it. It's really interesting to listen to some of these people because you have such legit people on here. They don't come across as crazy or unbelievable.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it's part of the way of changing or giving it a legitimacy because, I could come on here and talk no one's going to sit and listen to me talk for an hour, but I could come on here and cram down Bigfoot down everyone's throats. No one's going to care after a while. But if you listen to people who've experienced it, you'll stop and listen. You know what I mean? You'll stop and really go. Even I've had so many people contact me and say, I don't believe in Bigfoot, but that guy saw something. That woman saw something. That hunter saw something. And after a while, it's like, well, what do you think they saw? What is it you think these people are seeing? And I think that's really the way of changing the legit. You're not going to do it through Finding Bigfoot. And those are good guys. And I have nothing against those guys or anything like that. But what I'm saying is you're not going to do it through like Mountain Monsters and Finding Bigfoot and or researchers coming on and talking about their theories and buy my book and blah, 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 blah. No one cares. But if you stop, you'll listen to someone tell their story and say, hey, this happened to me. After a while, I mean, God, I've done 500 plus shows. After a while, these people are seeing something. Whether you believe in Bigfoot or not, it's irrelevant to me. These people are seeing something, like you saw something, Howard. And, what is it? What is out there? And that's the questions. And I really think that's how you get to the heart of what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That was the confusing part about what I saw, because clearly upright, clearly on two legs, arm movement. You know what I mean? I'm not looking at a bear. We have bear. It's really funny. We have bear in Oklahoma, and it's the craziest thing. We've actually had one show up in the central part of the state out of nowhere, and it wasn't a really big bear, but it just, they did. Like any other creature, they go where they want, So
yeah. There's no state lines.
I will never say that I know 100% that something like that exists, but I'm in the same theory that you are. This many people throughout the course of time, and we go back to a president who writes about this, and every Native American culture, especially here in Oklahoma, being very, I am Native American. Everybody here in Oklahoma is pretty much Native American, but every tribe has this. So where did it come from? Where did it generate from? Was there a single Native American back in time who said, you know what, I'm just going to tell people I saw a big monkey, and then we're just going to spread that rumor?
Well, rumors die over time.
Yeah,
legends don't, but rumors die over time. And I think, you're right. You talk to a lot of, even here in Washington State, you talk to a lot of Native Americans, and you'll get different stories. And it really depends. And what I find fascinating about it is you'll get a different perspective on the creature, depending on the tribe you talk to. Some of them say, hey, they won't harm you, leave them alone, and they'll leave you alone. Other tribes, they're like, kill them all. It's very interesting. It depends on the tribe and their perspective, their interactions with these things, and that's how they'll tell you about the creature. And God, I wish Pete was still alive. I'd love to talk to that guy.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, he was he was the quintessential Indian. And when I say that, his looks, his features, I mean, I remember the man's face, and luckily for me, I got to experience him at some point as a grandfather. But he was he was that wise Indian who he was just enjoy to be around, and just to go out in the woods with. He was very knowledgeable about everything. But my whole take on it is, everybody says, well, we would have shot one, we would have done this, we would have done that. Well, I don't know that they haven't been shot. And the other side of it too is, if I wanted to disappear, even in Oklahoma, I could disappear. There's enough out there, and if this thing uses a intelligence level to where it has rational thought, it's not hard to avoid people. It's really not. I think when people do have these experiences, maybe they're more curious than we are, and so that's where they get seen. So theories only. So,
yeah, I hear you. What do you think that they are, Pete? Or I almost said Pete. Howard, what do you think that they are, Howard? Sorry about that.
I would probably have to go the Gigantopithecus theory. I think I would lean more towards that because and now that you've got me on this kick of researching all the time, and reading, love to read, but and I'm noticing the differences between like the East Texas ones and the aggression that I was listening to about how they are versus what you have there, up in the Northwest. They seem a little more docile. I honestly would not have an answer. I don't know that it's an ape or it's a missing link, but who knows? I truly have no idea.
Yeah. It'd be nice to know. It really is a fascinating account, and I think I think it's interesting you screamed at it. You're like, hey, what are you doing down here? And the thing turns around and screams at you and takes off. And you probably surprised it. Probably wasn't expecting you guys to be there, and yelling at it. It kind of turned, and it's fascinating, man. It's really fascinating, especially you describe the color and how fast it moves.
Well, that's what I mean. Those are the things that you stick out in your mind and remember. And this is funny. We're going into that time of year, and this is a thought that has stayed with me my entire childhood. I mean, geez, I forgot who my first girlfriend was and everything in the world. But that's one thing you have never forgot is that experience and not ever knowing. That's the part that kills me is not knowing. What did you truly see? So
yeah, it'll probably stick with you for a while. For the rest of your life,
Well, I will tell you this though, too, because I've hunted everywhere. I mean, we travel Colorado and everywhere and hunt, but I always have that eye out. Does that make sense? I'm always like, okay,
always watching.
Oh, well, yeah, I think you have to. But I didn't realize some of the aggression that they have until I listened to your show. Some of these people have horrible experiences. Mine, no, this wasn't something that was traumatic. It was just, hey, a childhood experience. This is what happened. But some of these people have some really traumatic experiences, and I feel for them because trauma to the mind is very difficult to ever erase.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Howard, and taking the time to share your encounter. Thank you again.
Well, I appreciate it, Wes. I enjoy the show.
Thanks, Howard. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows.
You've got mail.
Apparently, I have mail. Well, let's read a little fan mail. Nothing can get me down today. Now it's written in all caps. That's never a good sign. Jim from Kentucky says, hey, Wes, you I used to love the show, but I think you're a pile of now. And your musical choices on the show are ruining the show. Okay. He says that he goes on and on. It's like the ramblings of a madman. F*** you, you pile of shit. I hope you die. What's he talking about here? If you ever play the Bee Gees or any form of it on your show again, I'm going to stop listening to you. Well, I wish you'd really tell me how you feel. You need to come out of your shell, Jim. You're spending too much time worrying about what other people think. You should just tell people how you feel, man. What else did he say here? If you ever play that Bee Gees song again, Staying Alive, or any version of it, I'm going to stop listening to your show. And I'm going to tell my friends and family to stop. I changed my mind. Sorry, Jim. I guess if you stop listening and everyone stops listening, the world could always use another bartender.
Get